So we are going to talk about grammar circuits. So Bob is going to talk about blah blah, and Vincent is going to talk about math, and which we propose this stuff as a practical foundation for grammar. Now this is broader than QNLP. Firstly, because I've given a lot of talks about QNLP recently, and they're all online. So if you do Coecke plus YouTube plus say topos or SM space, then you get one of them. Like this is the craziest, this is the longest. And I'm also on that thing there. So we post stuff there. Now, secondly, at the end, I'm going to say why this stuff is actually useful for QNLP as well. Okay, I will start with a little story which I've told a million times, but this is just to set a stage of what we're going to talk about. So I think a lot of people remember this. This is sort of thing among many genius things you find in this book. So you got this expression here. It's a symbolic expression, and you can translate this as a picture. Like people know this word. This means putting things side by side. This means putting one thing after another. You get that picture. Now, if then you take another completely different formula, like this one is a completely different formula. You say the tensors are in completely different places, circles. You get the same picture. So why do you get the same picture? The way I would like to say this is that these things, which are symmetric monoidal categories, their natural habitat is two-dimensional and not one-dimensional. One-dimensional, you get a lot of bureaucracy, which you just need to force it on one line, and it makes your life so complicated that you need equations to say that these things are equal, while in their natural habitat, they're trivially equal. You don't need equations to help you with that. And something similar is going on in language, although somewhat more subtle. It's not that naive, it's a lot more subtle. And I think we're only starting to understand that. But for example, you take this sentence, je t'aime, and you take this sentence, I love you. I mean, they mean the same thing, you know, they mean the same thing, but these pictures don't look at all the same. Why? Why don't these pictures look the same? And if you go to the symbolic sort of pre-group typings, which we've seen a lot about today, I mean, these things don't look the same at all. Why these sentences mean the same? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong is too much bureaucracy, and this bureaucracy happens to be language dependent. So ultimately, what I want to say, why is this bureaucracy there? Because these sentences, these words are forced on a line here. They're forced on a line there. Why? Because of this thing. We can't talk in two dimensions or higher dimensions. We can just say strings of words. So we're forced to use this sort of language. We force things in one dimension, and this comes with a lot of bureaucracy. Okay. And I mean, the natural question then comes, how can we eliminate that bureaucracy from language? And what is the natural habitat for language? By the way, wasn't grammar supposed to be universal? After all, what is universal in grammar? Okay, so what we got in mind here, I think I've written this down already. Okay, I'll take this away. Take this away. So this is talk mostly about grammar, you know. So we start with CG. This is categorical grammar, say pre-groups, whatever. What Michael was talking about is, by the way, from the same town as I come from. So we take categorical grammar. We want to see, can we make this universal in the sense that you don't have these differences between French and English anymore. You look really at the core of things. And then we also want to know, of course, how we can bring back the bureaucracy into it when you need to do so. So we're trying to figure out what lives here. Right? We just strip off language from all the bureaucracy. Now you also want to know how you bring the bureaucracy back. But what is the next one? Oh yeah, so what are the layers in bureaucracy? Okay, that's the next one. So this involves things like which language you speak, what poetry you like, how you like to order your words, which branch of lambic stuff you like, that all comes in here. Now you have a Discocat view on this thing. So Discocat says usually you take some categorical grammar, you assign meaning to it. There is this other thing which does text and where you compose things. This concern, we're kind of looking, what is the grammar for that thing? That's really what we're going to take as a starting point. because that stuff I understand a bit. And for people who haven't seen this, the sort of slogan of this disco search is sentence is a process that updates meaning. So most people in NLP, they work with static meaning. The whole point here is that meanings evolve as text progresses. You learn more, so the meanings evolve. Anyway, let me now go to a nice example sentence. Here is an example sentence. Well, I've been creative with different shapes of slides. Here's a nice sentence here. Well, oh, it doesn't work. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, these holes don't fit exactly. Doesn't matter. Alice likes flowers that Bob gives Claire. So, look, I make a hole here. That's easy. Right. So, what is this sentence really telling you? And I'm taking inspiration from this sort of disco search framework. I'm going to take, this is how I understand the structure of this sentence. You got Alice, you got flowers involved, you got Bob, maybe a bit thicker, and you got Claire. Okay, Alice likes flowers, so there is some sort of verb here, which I write down as a gate. So this is a circuit with a gate, and there's a like relationship there going on. There's a like relationship between Alice and flowers. And then, something else, there is a giving relationship going on between these three. There is a giving relationship going on between these three, I think. So this is between the flowers, Bob, and Claire. So there's something about giving going on here. That's it. For me, that's the structure of the sentence. Like, I mean, there is just this relationship between Alice and the flowers. There's a relationship between the flowers, Bob, and God being given. Okay, that's it. Now I'm going to show you a different sentence. Oh, there, come on, different sentence. Show up. Oh. Yeah, and I'm going to make my own holes again. Oh, come on, hole. Oh, come on, hole. There and there. So these different sentences, by the way. Huh? Bob gives Claire flowers that Alice likes. Completely different sentence. I'll show you them together. But Bob gives Claire flowers. Okay. So that's this gate again. Okay, that's good. That Alice likes the flowers. Okay, that's this gate. Well, so we're almost in exactly the same circuit. I mean, we're pretty much in the same circuit, I would say. Up to one little detail, which I'll explain later. But let me just show how different these sentences look. If you look at the pictures, and we're talking pre-groups here, it doesn't get any simpler than that, you know. There's nothing simpler than pre-groups. But I mean, look at the picture, the nesting. It's just totally, completely different things. And these sentences are actually trying to say exactly the same thing. So why is things so complicated? This is the same, and it looks not at all the same. Not yet. Okay, so not yet. And so the bottom line is both of these sentences essentially correspond to this single circuit. So almost, I say almost, there's one little detail. The one little detail is that in the first sentence, you might be tempted to write it like this. I'm reading my circuit design. In the second one, you may be tempted to first put the given and then the like, and you say, actually, and these things will typically not commute. No, they will. So why will they commute? If you take a gate like this, you can always rewrite it as something like this. So this is a gate. You can write it like this. And then I can write this like, say, something like that with a dot. If you've read all the guitar pedals papers Martha was talking about, and you've seen a lot of this. This thing is associative. You can check this, like, because I define it like that, it's associative. I just introduce this dummy wire. That's all I did. So I get an associative dot. It's a Frobenius dot. And I can actually think of all these gates here by extension of this argument to multiple parties as just things which are sitting on these Frobenius dots like that. So you've got a bridge here connecting this. Another one here. And this goes in here, goes in here, goes in here. I mean, so that's it. That's these two big complicated sentences. And they essentially just correspond to this gate. So just imagine how long it takes you to actually remember the structure of wiring here. And we're talking pre-groups, which is super simple. Anyway, so the point is, we advocate this as a better representation of what really matters about the structure of these sentences. Now, okay, what is the next one? Extreme simplification of this. So another big upshot about this is you can compose these scripts. Now you can compose grammar because they're circuits. You just compose them. It's not about single sentences anymore. And this structure goes well beyond language. This is not about language anymore. This is about anything you want. It's basically a circuit logic of interaction. And if you got a gate like one like here, where you just have one bot, it's like self-interaction. It's you are doing something with yourself. You know, this is like an interaction between two parties, like a predator hunting a prey. This sort of, which comes from a ditransitive verb. This is like a three-party interaction of some sort. And I mean, anything above is we don't deal with, I think, in our brain because we don't have this really in our language. Okay, so how much time? I'm probably pretty okay.
You're like 15?
Oh, okay. So, quick. So the last thing I say. So we have a few departures from pre-groups. So we distinguish between wire types and box types in your circuit because it's two things. So these wires, they carry equality. You got sentence types being a function of wire types. An important thing, I'm not going to show this because I'm running out of time, but the relative pronouns wirings, which we've been using for a long time now, you really need them. And you really deeply need this particular structure. And if you take all these assumptions I just told you, like relative pronoun wirings and all that, then these sentences become exactly the same structure. With all the assumptions I just gave, so you get a right system to go from this one to this one by filling in some of the boxes structurally. Why is all of this good? To do quantum natural language processing. You don't want this poor computer to have, or this MISC computer to have to deal with this complicated structure. What you want it to deal with is this circuit, because that's ultimately what it wants in the end anyway. Okay, so there is some math here.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the math real quick. If I have the time, I'm going to talk about the map from pre-group grammars to grammar circuits, and time permitting, then the map backwards, adding the bureaucracy back in. So what we're going to do is, well, okay, so for pre-group grammar, you assign your grammatical categories of words, and what's a grammatical category, like a noun or a verb or an indirect object complementizer or whatever, and you assign that a pre-group type. And let's say that pre-group type is something like A to the L, B, C, R, D, R, R. And what we're going to do first is we're going to assign each of these guys a morphism. How are we going to assign them a morphism? Well, let's start by giving them a box. And let's take any odd number of adjoints as an input. Well, the A wants to eliminate from the right or the left. I'm never sure. The C wants to eliminate like that. The D and the B, okay, even numbers of adjoints, we're going to treat as outputs. We're going to say that the B comes out here, and then the D, well, that bends over once and comes out, and then there's some twists here to make sure that the types match up. The point is that we end up with a state, something that only gives out outputs. Now, I want you to look at this spaghetti and meatballs configuration first. All the spaghetti around, and then this meatball gate in the middle. This meatball gate in the middle is sufficient to prove that meaning wires, so the fundamental wires that carry meaning throughout the circuit, exist. Why so? Because this process is saying, okay, for this particular grammatical category, that is all words of the indirect object complementizer type, they take in an A and a C, and they produce a B and a D. And that's enough, because we know that a grammatical sentence deemed by pre-groups to be grammatical needs to produce a sentence type atomic token at the end. So we can ask of all of the pre-group types that we have, who can give me a sentence type? And maybe your transitive verb says, oh, I can give you a sentence type if you give me 2 noun types. And then you can recurse the question and say, okay, well, who can provide 2 noun types? Now, it's a fact that As long as the language of your pre-group grammar is non-empty and only contains finite strings, then there have to be grammatical categories of words whose pre-group types are just giving you types for free without requiring any input. The argument is quite technical, but here's the essence of it. If you're at a party and you want some beer, and you go around and you have nothing, but you ask someone, hey, can you give me some beer? And they say, well, I can give you some beer, but maybe you have to give me this first. And everyone wants something first before they give you anything. You're not going to get any beer. So by the contrapositive, if you do manage to get a grammatically correct sentence at the end, there must be someone there giving you something for free. And those grammatical categories that give you something for free, we're going to treat as our meaning wires. We've just shown that meaning wires exist just from the definition of a pre-group. And what are we going to do? Well, okay, for them, we're going to assign them special morphisms. So the morphisms we assign them, they're really only giving us this output type, but we will symmetrize and say, okay, well, we'll let you have an input type. Why do we want to do this? Because every other grammatical category looks like this. It has some gate with some spaghetti around it, and maybe there's a gate with some spaghetti around it, and maybe here's another meaning type contributing a wire over here. Now, the point is, if you compose the pre-group proof on top of that, then what you get is, oh, a nice circuit representation. Just pull out all the spaghetti, and you're good. And we're already halfway there to meaning circuits, because, well, the input types, yeah, they're all their meaning characters. All we need to do is symmetrize. Okay, minor point. How do we know that we can always untangle all this spaghetti? Well, there's no necessary and sufficient condition on pre-groups that I know of. You can always check, though, to rule out cycles in your computer. But there's a very easy graphical condition that's a sufficient condition for the spaghetti untangling that you can check by eye. And it goes like this. As long as all your gates look like this, or they're surrounded by spaghetti, but the meatball inside only has one output, you're good. And you can always normalize to a form within a compact closed category that has no cups and caps. Why so? Well, because the only reason you would need cups and caps is if you have some kind of future output linking back to a past input. However, if everything only has one output, then you've just created a loop. And if you've created a loop, there's nothing here that can actually generate that last sentence token type that you need for a grammatical sentence. So every grammatical sentence can't have future outputs linked back to past inputs, and you can always stretch out to this. Okay, and we're almost there. How would we go about symmetrizing this? Well, there are lots of different ways, but here's one that I like. All you do is you go through the diagram bit by bit, and for each gate, you just make the output types match up with those input types. And now you've symmetrized the output. So, here, easy. And so that's the map. We've got a map from universal. We've got a map from the pre-group grammars to the grammar circuits. The other direction, well, it's our hypothesis that for any grammar circuit, there's some natural language out there, and there are a lot of them, such that you can always bring back the grammar circuit into natural language form. However, we know that for a particular fragment of English, which consists of nouns, adjectives, intransitive, transitive, and ditransitive verbs that take 1, 2, and 3 arguments respectively, and adverbs, plus some other constructions like is, by, and relative pronouns like that and who, this works. Oh, and there are no tritransitive verbs in English nor in natural languages generally. It's a very rare construction in natural languages. Okay, so what's the idea? Well, we're going to use the spider theorem. We're going to say, okay, well, adjectives just modify a single noun. I'm going to say that transitive verbs modify 2, and we'll say that ditransitive verbs modify 3, and we'll say that adverbs sort of behave like a polymorphic spider update, and they can modify either 1, 2, or 3 wires. Now, the benefit of having these spider updates is that spiders are associative. So these gates actually commute vertically. You can push them up and down past each other. And what that means is that if you look at one of these circuits from the top, well, what does it look like from the top? Well, the wires now would be points because you're looking at them from the top. And now your gates just look like loops that modify your meaning. Now, what's the game here? Well, the game here is, okay, now we have this abstract representation of what a grammar circuit is representing. And we want to get to a situation where we can sort of have a linear ordering of all of these nouns so that that linear ordering is kind of just the pattern that the bureaucracy of syntax, language syntax requires. And we can do this in English because we have the passive voice construction. Alice likes Bob is the same thing as Bob is liked by Alice. Alice gave Charlie flowers is the same thing as the flowers that Charlie gave, that Charlie received from Alice, or that the point is you get this free ordering that you can do. But in order to do that, you have is, by to construct the passive voice and relative pronouns. The other benefit of relative pronouns is that you can copy the occurrences of nouns. I can say Alice likes Bob, Bob likes Charlie, or I can say Alice likes Bob, who likes Charlie. So I can have multiple occurrences of the same noun. And what that means is that having a situation like this, I can start linearizing. Let's see if I can do this right. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Oh, shit. I messed up. Well, point is, with dotted wires that represent copying and pronoun resolution, what you can always do, since you have all these free orderings of nouns, is you can set it up so that you have this sequence of nouns such that every verb or every loop, their constituents of that loop appear consecutively, and the overlap of any two of these gates is going to be on precisely a single wire. And now what that means is you can kind of read off just from this linearization what's going on. Okay, well, Alice likes how Bob likes Charlie, and Charlie chases Bob, or Charlie chases him. And so, yeah, that's the map going the other way. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay, we're
thank you guys. You finished?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because we thought we were going to steal each other's halves.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone's invited to post questions into the Slack group. We still have a couple of minutes, I think. Before then, I was wondering, how does this relate to Antonin's construction then? Is there something that precise that can be said? This is the one about really making a compact category, right?
I mean, there's nothing free going on here. Huh?
Yeah.
It's really just like you forget a lot of stuff. You just forget a lot of stuff. You're almost doing the opposite. You forget about, I mean, you try to get rid of your cups and caps totally. And because it generates such an additional complexity. And if you want to stick this on a machine, like a near-term quantum computer, that's basically eating all your resources to some great extent. So why not just do grammar? I mean, it seems that anything which is essential about telling, like how these verbs and stuff like that interact with each other, is like can be written in a simple circuit. So it's much easier to do that. It's much easier to do that. And I mean, I don't know to which extent that these differences are purely linguistic. I'm sure there's more going on, but a lot of it is just choice of language. Why would a quantum computer care which language it's speaking? Why would it do that? For whatever reason. Maybe at the end, of course, you wanted to make it then talk to a particular individual and bring the language construction here. So that's what this backward map is doing. So what you really do is you got an input, which is real human language. Then you bring this to the universal thing. Then you do all your processing in your computer with a language which we can't speak, we can't hear. But for the computer, it doesn't matter. It's perfectly, it's equally good as English. It's even better because it's less bureaucracy. And then you go back after that to the bureaucratic form of language. So you can speak to somebody. So it's like you get rid of just junk. You do your reasoning, you bring the junk back in, because we humans just don't know how to speak otherwise.
Okay, Daniel.
We're the problem. We're definitely the problem here.
Okay, we got one question quickly. Daniel Mallet asks how are modal sentences represented in circuits?
That's a pretty good question. Modal sentences and sentential complementizers are always pretty tough, and you'll know from a truth conditional treatment of them, you'll need like possible crypty rules and stuff. So this is actually quite related in my mind to spatial relations and how they're presented. The mathematical underpinnings are forthcoming, and Bob and I are working on that. We believe that graphically what that's going to look like is, Paul-André Maillet's functorial boxes, where you can kind of zoom into what's inside a wire and see what's going on. But the idea is that, well, yeah, meaning carriers, they can also be full sentences, like Alice likes that Bob gave Charlie the flowers. And so what Alice is liking is another meaning carrier, which is a wire, the internal structure of which is the sentence Bob gave Charlie the flowers. So the graphical calculus for that is coming soon. Keep a lookout for it.
Okay, thank you. Edwin Agnos says, how is a question represented?
A question is very easy. I mean, it's again, if you want to put this on a line, you have no way to do respect to what a question is, but a question is almost a sentence. A question is like, you think of having just a full sentence with a transitive verb. What is a question? A question is basically you raise something. And then what you should do in your circuit is like, you just go down, you're basically waiting for an input in the future. Once this input is given, but you need agency there, you need agency. You got the one who questions and you're the one who answers. And then the answer is just an opening. It's an input waiting for, it's an input waiting for something that your other agent will stick in. And that's really, I mean, there's old papers by Alexis and Giovanni, and where really use already this sort of form of question answering with this sort of interpretation of questions. So it's a very natural thing in a circuit, but you need this temporal dimension of a circuit to make sense to that, like this opening here in the future, which gets filled in, and then you got a full sentence.
Okay. I think we're going into the time of the next talk now.